think it's really easy to entangle our ambition and our arts to either idea of what success is. And I think that that can be really detrimental to the process of making things. I think that if we allowed in our process too much of us thinking, is this going to sell? Is this going to happen? To filter in, it would be at the detriment of our work.
Welcome to You're Not Gonna Make It. My name is Nico Casabecchi. I'm a filmmaker from Argentina, based in LA. You're Not Gonna Make It is a podcast about surviving our career expectations, where I sit down with successful people to debunk their Insta lives and celebrate the low points of their careers in a quest to find out what making it really means for me and for them. Okay, so in today's episode, I'm sitting down with Dylan Guerra, who I met in Sundance last January. We were both showing our short films. That's a shameless plug on my end. We were in the same category and we became friends. I don't know, perhaps we're friends. I haven't asked him yet, but I hope he says yes. We'll find out today. Let me tell you about Dylan. He's a very, very successful guy. He is a Brooklyn-based queer Colombian writer-director, originally from Miami. And as I mentioned, his film, Didn't Think I'd See You Here, just premiered in Sundance. He's a writer on the Emmy-nominated third season of Max the Other Two. Not many people know about this, but he's also an actor on that show. He's set to direct his first feature produced by Picture Start and Get LFTD. Are you feeling bad about yourself already? Okay, here's more. Dylan has various television series in development with A24, and he keeps going. He's a playwright. His most recent play, Signaling, has been presented in the American Museum of Natural History. He also hosted shows for AMC, teaches playwright to military veterans. Are you fucking kidding me right now? What's wrong with this guy? Is there a flaw we can find to make us feel better? We'll find out in my conversation with him. But he is an amazing guy. He has this amazing spirit that transcends his success as an artist. Here is my conversation with Dylan Guerra. Hope you like it. What do you do when you come to LA?
I just see a lot of people. I have a little some meetings, but it's usually my best friend lives there and she's about to have a baby, and so
we do babies.
That's why I'm going
in LA.
Yo, yeah, there's so much hiking in LA. Everybody hikes.
Yeah, we'll hike with you. We will take you to eat healthy.
Oh, right. Yeah. And a lot of avocados.
We're gonna drive you around. Hi, Dylan.
Hi. I'm like adjusting myself. There you go.
Just get ready. Get perfect.
My lighting's so weird in this room. I don't know why. I'm like half in shadow, but whatever.
No, you have a nice dramatic kind of like
it's so intense, and I look like a vampire.
Wait, maybe you are. I'm glad to have you.
I might be.
I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Yeah,
I was just remembering how we met. I just said this, but in the intro, but then so we became friends. Are we friends?
We're friends.
It's official?
Come on. Yeah, it's official. We spent an insane week together.
That's such a weight off my shoulders to know that. Thank you. Okay, so I remember we spent, I think the consolidation of our friendship was on a bus ride to the director's breakfast thing.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a throwback to being 12 and hanging out with a new friend on a bus, which
it really was
happened as an adult.
It really was. I know. That was like, not to be all like Sundance about it, but that was the thing that I was like so thrilled by and totally didn't expect from Sundance was how much it did. It just felt like being at like film summer camp.
It's the part that I enjoy the most, to hang out with other filmmakers.
Yeah, truly. And it's like Film City. I don't know why I wasn't expecting that fully, but yeah.
It was your first short film.
It was my first film, yeah.
And you got into Sundance, of course, because you're Dylan Guerra, and that's how you do it.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
How was the moment when you find out? Well, how did you find out?
I think I might have told this story when we met, but I got an email. I know that they call people, but I either didn't get a call or I like missed the call. And I got an email when I woke up at like, I saw it in my inbox at like 8 a.m. maybe. And it just said like, Didn't Think I'd See You Here, the name of the short, and then an X, and then Sundance. And I was like, what is this email? And it was like, it started with like, congratulations, like you got into Sundance. And truly, I disassociated and I instantly was like, this isn't true. This isn't real. And without reacting or calling anybody or doing anything, I got up and I went into my office and I background checked the name of the person that sent me the email because I'm like weird and I pay for
Wait.
background checks.
How do you actually background check someone?
Like
Is there
it
a
said,
website?
there's a website, there's like a background check website that I like.
Where do you know this?
Because I have a very like gossipy family, I guess, and we like love drama. And my aunt had a background check site, also partially because my aunt owns a dance
Blood
studio.
thickens.
I know. Well, my aunt owns a dance studio, and so she has to background check the people that she hires. So she just like does it through this like website, and I got
For a
addicted to
second?
the website.
For a second, my brain processed that your aunt has a dance studio, so of course also runs a background check website.
Oh,
Like
right,
her
yeah, yeah.
own
That'd be so cool.
side gig.
But I wish. So I background checked her, and then I saw that she was real, but I was like, okay, but this could be a fake email address. And then I reverse Googled the email address, and it brought me to her like page on the Sundance website that's like short film coordinator or whatever the title was. And then it like hit me, and I instantly started crying, and I called the lead actor who was also a producer. And I was like, we got into Sundance, and I had this running joke with him where I would call him and say, like, we didn't get into, like, it would be so stupid, but I'd be like, oh man, we just got another rejection. Yeah, this time we got rejected from like Stink Festival for the smelliest film. And then we'd be like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And we had this like running joke where whenever he called me to see how the film was doing, I just said, I made up a festival that we didn't get into. And so when I called him for Sundance, he was like, you're lying to me. And I was like, no, this is a real one. And then he started crying on the phone, and it was a really special moment. But yeah, my imposter syndrome kicked in a way it like never had.
That's so funny that you had to background check and then reverse engineer the email just to make sure it was right. And you only allowed yourself to cry once you had gone through that process. That's amazing.
Once I knew it was real.
That's so funny. And so before we dive into more serious stuff, because I really want to know about your process.
Yeah.
I have something I want to throw at you. And we were just discussing this before on the phone. I want this podcast to be timeless, so independent of world events. But I will risk ruining all that just for the pleasure of talking to you about the Willy Wonka Glasgow experience.
Yeah.
Which is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And it's pure cringe core, right?
Oh, 100%. You know what's funny is it's almost a year to the date from when Angela Bassett did the thing, the like the BAFTA rap.
Yeah, the rap.
And it's like the new thing that to me has dethroned it. It's an annual February event. I mean, what do you want to know? It's brilliant.
Bassett. This tops Angela Bassett. This is amazing. I think this is unique. To me, the reason I wanted to bring it up is because it's a weird introduction to this idea, but to me, the Willy Wonka Glasgow experience, in a way, it's a beautiful cautionary tale about the dangers of overestimating AI. So hear me out.
100%.
Because this is for context. This is an event that it was created by some sort of like Glasgow tech bros. I don't know. But what we know is that the scripts and the imagery, everything was created by AI. And it turned out bad. It was like, soulless at best, I would say. I would qualify it. It was clearly no artist at the wheel. But what's fascinating to me is that the debacle was saved by two actors going rogue from this, horrible plan that these people had, and just like improvising some performance in front of a very angry crowd. Yeah. So in a way, these are the cutest heroes of the story, and they use theater to save the day, which is the most ancient artistic technology. So to me, that's a win for humans. And I wanted to know your opinion because you come from theater.
It is, yeah. Well, it is on the front lines of the AI war. It is like a first solidly won battle to me. I mean, I'm obsessed with the experience with the whole thing, and I think it's so interesting because it's kind of firing on all cylinders. There's something about, so obviously the AI promising this like incredible, wild, you've never seen anything like it experience. Like, have you seen the posters? And like on that level, there's something that like everyone can relate to about like a dream deferred, like a dream just absolutely shattered and happening in mass for these children is just sort of like baseline hilarious. But to me, the thing that I think is like the most interesting and sort of telling of our time is like, and I'm not sure how much you followed this part of it, but the actors that saved it, we know that they saved it from like some videos that were found, but also because they like stepped forward on TikTok and were like, we have this, and so this is our story. And so we actually, as people, in America, have a shit ton of access to seeing this like colossal failure that like merges a hot button issue like AI, like a classic theme, the destruction of a dream, and then like we also have a character in like the unknown. Like there's also like
the unknown is amazing. Because it's an AI hallucination that became a thing. Like it was
100%.
So for people who don't know about this, the experience included this character who's not related to the original Willy Wonka story at all, which is called The Unknown. That it's interpreted by this person with a kind of like a it's like a kind of like a carnival mask or whatever.
Yeah,
very simple. And she's just carrying
like
children
in like a black trash bag.
She's in a black trash bag, and it's the embodiment of an AI hallucination that God knows where it came from. But it ended up being the best thing that happened.
It's so scary, but it's also like it just also, I guess, I mean, if I'm being too dramaturgical, I don't want to like step on any fun here, but like it's also fascinating to me where it's like the tangible part of the AI is that it made the like it is also it is AI's own creation, which makes it scary, but also like such a fail and so stupid. And I think the lines of these that she says as the unknown are like, I am the unknown.
The line is like, it's on the nose, perhaps, if somebody argue that.
But I love it. And it's also weird to see. I mean, this is just, and then this kind of connects to like how our fucking industry works. But like, then we see there's like a musical coming out about the Willy Wonka Glasgow experience. I think somebody got the rights or something to like there's some sort of like, we know that there's going to be.
So they finally copyrighted an AI creation, which is a first.
I don't know if it was actually like a copywritten thing, but like somehow someone is making some sort of like origin story about the unknown character, which like.
I pray God that the unsung heroes of this story, which are the actors who actually came up with those things, get paid for this musical. I'm putting it out in the universe because
I know.
I hope it's not the bad guys who get the money to sell this debacle. Like the guy who went to Firefest, like went to jail for Firefest, and he's doing it again. Have you ever had the experience of having to save a performance or panic during a performance? Because I feel that's such
all the time.
That's Tuesday for you.
Okay, the one thing that comes to mind. This is maybe the closest to. It's not a play, but it's the closest to the Glasgow experience. While literally, I don't think I've ever talked about this. When I was in college, a summer during college, I think maybe between my sophomore and junior year or something like that, I was putting on. I had this like kind of how I got my start in theater. I went to a performing arts high school, and then in the summers, my friends and I made this little theater company in Miami called the Company, and we would put on a play every summer that one of us wrote, and it was a lot of the time it was like a short play fest, and we would bring in different like local actors, and we would always have charity fundraisers for it that were weird. So we threw this charity fundraiser that was an immersive Clue game. And we ambitious, and we hired local actors who were improv actors, and we gave them all the parts that they needed to play and sort of like points that were important for them to hit. And this one woman went completely off the script and started hurling actors. And it's like we're doing like a murder mystery in like an immersive. Like it was actually at my aunt's dance studio, and we like converted it all into these things, and we're doing these to raise money for our theater project. So we're also trying to seem like we're confident and we know what we're doing, even though we're like 20 and drunk and don't know what we're doing. And this woman just went, who's like, she's a dear friend of my family's, but she just, I don't know what happened. She like snapped and she went completely off script. She spoiled the murder for everybody. So then we had to come up with a different murder like while we're doing it to try to figure it out. So that on the go. So it was just like, I mean, so when I see the Glasgow experience, I'm like, I kind of get how this happened.
She spoils the mystery for everyone. What was the faces of the people? Did people get it? Or was like, it was
no. Everybody was so confused. Everybody was like, what am I doing? Why am I here? And it was an audience of like 40 people doing this like immersive murder mystery.
I feel already as an audience, immersive theater is so challenging for audiences in a good way, but also kind of like it makes you intimidated because you're so close to performance. Like you don't want to be so close. It feels
it's
like
really hard.
You don't know what to do with your body as an audience. It feels like you're a part of the play. You got to answer questions. It puts you on the spot and it forces you to confront, am I performing or am I just being an audience? Like there's some comfiness that is removed on an immersive play.
And it's interesting to me because I think that's actually like a really interesting way to get at certain ideas. You know, like it's about to close, but in New York, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but we've had this Sleep No More, which has been sort of like a cultural institution in New York for the last like 15 years. Yeah, same.
It's closing.
It's closing next month.
Wow.
And one of the things that I think is really interesting about it is, you know, I mean, get the story, don't get the story, follow a story, whatever. But what it's actually exploring is this idea of voyeurism and this idea of like sexuality and sort of desire and darkness, and you're masked and everything is very sensual. And I'm like, you kind of do leave there feeling something that you can't quite feel in any other, that level of voyeurism of like, I'm witnessing something, I'm behind a mask, I'm in mask with other people that are watching. There's something there that's like, the work that I make is not immersive, and I'm not necessarily super interested in creating that myself in this moment, but there is something that I think is like really tantalizing about it in a way that if I was that, like, yeah.
I think Sleep No More helps with the fact that you're wearing a mask, and I think that creates the buffer that really makes you more comfortable. Like that's such a clever device, because by putting on the mask as an audience, you are removing yourself a little bit from the experience, and it allows you to get closer to the actors. True story, I was kissed by an actor in Sleep No More by a gorgeous man.
Was it the male witch?
I don't remember. We
That's
didn't
the hot
exchange
character,
phones, but I came out of a booth just kind of shaken, and my wife like recognized me behind the mask, which was funny. Okay.
I love that. I love this story. You were like, we're going to talk about art. We're going to do all of these things. We're going to talk about the time I was kissed by a boy in a phone booth.
Challenged my whole worldview. I've shaken my world since then. I'm recovering. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your process and your work.
Yeah.
Let me see my notes. Yeah. So there's a surreal quality to your work that I love, because you experience as an audience when you're watching as an audience, when I was watching your short, I experienced this roller coaster of uncertainty, which was like the shifts in tone that felt very organic. And I'm really interested about that, because your work is very grounded. For people who doesn't know, your work has a surreal quality to it, but it's very grounded. It feels like the surrealism or magic or ideas just cut through a very grounded situation. I was watching Together, which I will call a play. I guess it's also a monologue, right? About a man who just broke up with his partner and decides to move to a German clock where he has an encounter with a tiny man. Helps him deal with trauma. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
I think it's such an example. I feel like that piece is such an example of your tone, because it's funny, but it doesn't. But it takes itself very serious, and this tension creates this commitment that you have to that tone. It just creates something that it's funny, but it's also very poetic and very heartbreaking and beautiful. And so I want to ask you, how do you know that works in your head when you're creating something that is so tonally diverse, I guess?
Thank you. I want to say, before I launch into that I love Border Hopper and I love your work, and I was so happy that our films were playing with each other, because I feel like we kind of are we do a different kind of surrealism and we do different kind of magical realism in our work, but we both love playing with like grounded realities and taking, I think, weird and hard to discuss and things that would typically fall under the category of like drama or can feel sort of like not soapy but can feel heavy. That's the word I was looking for in a way. But what I love about your work is like you inject it with color and you bring a layer of fun and celebration. Like it's no shock to me that you want to come on this podcast and talk about the Glasgow experience with like art terms, because I felt like Border Hopper did such a wonderful job of adding this like animated, playful, joyful element in something that is like so beyond fucked up that happens. And so it puts you on a roll. It's like very destabilizing in a really specific, very fun way that I just like, it's like so easy to get lost in your stories in a wonderful way, because there's such a specificity and a color and a celebration in it that I feel like a lot of these traditional stories lose in a lot of that.
Thank you. I think that's thank you. I think that's where we intersect, perhaps, like this idea of like taking grounded stories and injecting something that breaks from that in. And I like it because I think it combines unexpected elements. Who says that, combining just to create something, you combine all ideas in a new way or new ideas in an old way.
Yeah.
I feel like there's something about that in your short as well. But that's why I'm really interested to know in the genesis of it. When do you think, how is the process, I guess, that you come up with that?
Yeah. So as far as like talking about how I know something is going to work, I would say for me, it's like, I'm not the most like woo. I mean, I read tarot cards and I'm very into like saging my apartment and things like that, but I'm not like the most like woo woo. I'm like a pretty practical person. And so for me though, I'm about to say something kind of witchy, which is like, I just kind of like feel it and I'll kind of know, oh, this is the thread to pull from. Which, like with that German clock story and having the little person that lives in the clock, I was like, I think this will work because it's a somewhat recognizable lore. It's playing with clocks. I wrote that during the pandemic. And so I was like, there's something that feels, to me, it felt like I was getting closer to dissecting the feelings that I was trying to dissect, that I was experiencing via this like strange little man that lives in a clock. And that just had like, it just like molded for me in a way that I was like, I think if I'm pursuing the feeling of the thing, like I think if I'm riding on the current of I am just simply trying to express this thing and this is the best vehicle to do it in, that it'll work. Which kind of goes into like, if you're asking about like process and conception, I mean, it changes project to project, but in general, I typically refer to things as I'm working on them as my little experiment. So I usually have like hypothesis that I'm using from like a technical standpoint. I have a hypothesis that I'm trying to work out. And with Didn't Think I'd See You Here, it was, can I get an audience to feel without context and then allow the context to come into play later in the movie? Like you only get the sort of reveal of what the central character Rory had been struggling with sort of toward the end of the party scene, which is about 9 minutes into a 13-minute film.
It's the third act, basically.
Yeah, the third act. And then you get the reveal at the end with this is a spoiler alert. I guess if you're listening to this podcast, pause, try to watch my short, and then come back and listen from here on out. But at the end, when there's the ghost reveal, it was really important to me that the ghost is not the ghost of his dead ex-boyfriend. And that we have like another third twist there that sort of recontextualizes grief in another way. So like from a baseline, I'm like, what's the experiment that I want to have? And then what's the most fun game? Maybe it's because I'm from comedy world, but like, what's the most fun game to play with that? What is the like repeatable or the interesting thing? And I was like, well, mapping this idea of context onto a ghost story, onto like something that is like quite literally like invisible and told around a campfire, there's a certain synergy to those that felt sort of organic to me being able to play with tone and play with things on their head. And, I specifically was really interested in using the colors at the party, like the blues and the reds and the purples and the pinks, to tell a ghost story that's we typically associate with like wood and like a manor or a castle or like very cold. I kind of wanted a movie that felt actually fairly warm a lot of the time, or at least injected with a lot of color. And so it's a balancing act. But in general, I'm like, if I can identify the game, which for this was Ghost Story, and if I can identify the experiment and the hypothesis and the thing that I'm trying to test, then I can just sort of like play around in it until something feels right. And sometimes the experiments don't work. There's an edit of Didn't Think I'd See You Here that is very bad.
As it usually happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so terrifying to edit. The first pass is like, oh, I fucked it. I mean,
totally.
I guess the biggest lows on a director's life are, I think, the first, and I've seen this from different directors, not only me, but the biggest lows on a director's career are the first pass of the edit, because you finally, I think you're bringing this kind of platonic ideal of your fantasy to the real world, and you, for the first time, you're facing the thing that, not the thing you wanted to do, but the thing you could do, and the thing that happens in reality. You know, that this is what happened in reality. This is what I could achieve. And there is something beautiful about that. And it's also, there's a grief moment of letting go of your fantasy and slowly, you know, starting dating this reality of the film that you could do. And it gets polished. But I think what's interesting to me is that the polish of the first edit that is so terrifying, my thinking is that it gets better because you work more on it, but also it gets better because you cope with the fact that you're not going to see what you were expecting to see. You're going to see something different. You start to get acquainted with it. And the project, I think, is a very transcendental moment where you shift from this idea to reality, and you start, you know, connecting to the material. And now you're the directing of this thing that was shot.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, like I said, I come from theater, and like our version of that is typically a play will go through like extensive rewrites and a development workshop and a reading series, or, you know, or and a public reading. And then it'll have a rehearsal process where the play's worked on more. And then it's put before the audience in previews. And then previews happen for a period of time. And then it opens and the show is locked at that point. And previews are sort of like when you see the first edit in a film. And I've had experiences where I'm watching something in preview and I'm like, this is fully not working. And I have, you know, X amount of days to make this work before it gets together. And it usually gets there. But it is that there is that, like, you know, I think of it a lot of the times, especially with making film, where it's like sometimes I'm standing too close to the wall and I don't see a way to get around it. But if I take a step back, if I zoom back from the wall, I'll see that, like, oh, the wall actually ends a mile that way. Or, oh, actually, there's a ladder on the ground near the wall. Or like, oh, look, there's actually a door in that wall. Because sometimes I think it's really easy. I think I experienced this a lot in working on Didn't Think I'd See You Here. And I experienced it a lot in my, well, I'll talk about that in a sec. But where I've been living with the project for so long, I love it so much that I something that we did with Didn't Think I'd See You Here was after we did our first edit, I was like, I want to not watch this for 2 weeks. And I was like, let's all step away from this project for 2 weeks, and then let's come back, and then let's rewatch the edit that we have, and then let's like figure it out from here. That was like me, the editor, the composer, the sound make, like the full team that was already sort of on it. And so through that, the score changed entirely. And then the sound mixing, we kind of decided to go in a different direction. I cut a full scene from the film. Like, it was just one of those things where it was like, as soon as I actually had distance from the project, I could see it again through my own eyes instead of,
I feel like taking a step back from your work is perhaps the only way that we have as an artist to see it with fresh perspective. Because, you know, in a way, the artist who created the thing is the only one who could never get to experience it firsthand, which I think is super sad. The fact that, you know, an audience will sit on a, you know, cinema or watch it in a computer for the first time, get these emotions without knowing anything about the thing. You're never going to experience that as a filmmaker.
Yeah,
you're never going to get a first look. I think the best you can do is to step back. If you have the luxury of time, stepping back and seeing it again. I think the other thing that really helps is to see things with an audience.
Oh, 100%.
See things with an audience really helps get perspective. It's like you're seeing this thing for the first time. I don't know, maybe it's me, but generally speaking, it really helps me. I mean, it's a completely different look.
It 100% helps me. And it's also like, well, it's funny with Didn't Think I'd See You Here, because we've been on the festival circuit for a bit now. We played Sundance, we played the Lower East Side Film Festival, New Fest, a film festival in Ohio I didn't go to, and New Hampshire Film Festival. And in New Fest, we were in the comedy shorts. In Nightmare Film Festival, we were the midnight shorts block, which were like the weird ones. And then we were in the romance section of the Lower East Side Film Festival. And then New Hampshire and Sundance, we didn't play with, there wasn't a theme attached to the thing. So it was interesting because at New Fest, which was a wonderful festival, I had a great time there. My experience of watching it with an audience was like they were expecting a hard-hitting comedy. And so the like reversals of the film like really landed on them in a really strange way because they were primed to watch something that I think is like frankly like lighter or like chock full of laughs, which there are some jokes in the movie, but it's funny. Not like I consider it a comedy, but would I put it like next to
it's not broad comedy for
harder,
sure.
Right, exactly. And so that's interesting. That just baseline was interesting to me, and I say that like with love to New Fest because I like loved being in that part of that festival, and they treated us all so well. So it was fun being at Sundance and hearing it with an audience of like everyone that's at Sundance is like film goers. People that go to Sundance are people that like love movies, and we were stacked up in like we talked about it before, but it was all like Latino. It was like half Latino surrealism. And so each film sort of like primed to watch the other films in a way that was like
the energy in that room was amazing. It feels like it was the beginning of something. It felt like very beautiful.
Totally. I 100% like, I feel like our line of directors was just us like sobbing one right after the other when our film credits started rolling. I like did not expect to have such an intense, but I like didn't see the film that played after because I was like working on composing myself so hard.
That's so cute.
It was cute. I'm an emotional sap, but yeah. Anyway, but I agree. I agree with you with distance is always helpful.
How do you deal with the lows? How do you deal with rejection? And because there's so much rejection in what we do constantly.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm actually like I'm pretty okay with rejection. I think I grew up with a dad who's a stand-up comedian and a mom who is an actor in like they're both in the local Miami scene. And so I kind of grew up watching them go out for things and not get them. And so rejection always felt like that was sort of the agreement that you make when you're going into this industry is that there's going to be a lot of no's. And I just sort of what I tell myself is if somebody is rejecting me for something, then I probably ultimately didn't want them either. If they're saying no to, didn't think I'd see you here, didn't get into, there was like a tiny film festival that I just thought was interesting. It was in a city that I thought was cool. I'm not naming the festival, but it was like a much smaller, it was on the smaller end of the festivals that we applied to. And we didn't get in. And it was the first rejection we got for the film. It was our first like thing that we heard back, and it was a rejection. And that weirdly, like in my entire career, that was the rejection that sort of stung the most. So I was like, you were the little one. I didn't even want you that bad and you rejected me. And then I was like, wait, let me check myself here and be like, you're being a diva. And maybe perhaps like bringing this film there wasn't the sort of what was in the cards. I don't know. I think faith is really important. And I don't mean like religion. I mean like faith in self and faith in what you're making and sort of knowing that it will find the right people. And so I don't know. I find that when I'm rejected, sometimes I get a little angry and then I write something, and usually the writing doesn't turn into anything. I'll like work on a script. Usually it doesn't become, the next screenplay I'm working on or the next play or whatever it is. But it's like a nice reminder that's like, okay, I do know what I'm doing. Just because somebody said I don't like it doesn't mean that I don't know how to do it. And that's, I don't know, that's helpful for me. Rejection's weird.
That's interesting because I feel that we somehow are like, I feel like somehow we give too much importance to the outcome over the process, especially as you are growing in your career and you're professionalizing your career and becoming bigger at what you do. You start becoming too calculative, becoming too much.
Yes.
You immediately start contaminating your art with the expectation of the outcome. And that is a such a vibe killer. Like it's really hard to walk back and reconnect with your own craft and your art and the purpose that you did it in the first place, right? Because you're thinking, okay, if I do this, where it's going to get? And I'm really interested in that because, like, especially for New York and LA are both very ambitious cities that
Totally.
I think push you in that direction of being very calculative. I think also an industry that is not subsidized, like European, and like if you live in Europe, I come from Argentina. Argentina is dismantling its culture, its cultural subsidies and helps. But we used to have, and we hopefully will again, have a very robust ecosystem of support for the arts. So that creates a completely different artistic landscape where the artists become important for different reasons, and they're interested in different kinds of things. It completely changes the game. And Europe, to some extent, is the same. But in America, where there's no subsidies, there's no help, you had to hustle. You got to play the game.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to balance how to play the game at the same time, not relinquishing completely your artistic expectations or interests, right?
100%. And I also think, like, kind of on that, and it's hard. I have a terminal. So my best friend and I she is a theater director, and we collaborate a lot together. She was also one of the producers on the Didn't Think I'd See You Here. And we kind of created just like terms for us to use, where what I say all the time is I say I'm either having like a blazer on or a blazer off week. And if I'm having a blazer off week or a blazer off day, it means that I'm just sort of selfishly focusing on the art. But if I'm coming into something blazer on, it means that I'm approaching it from the business perspective. And having just a word to say, like, I am doing the ambitious part of the selling and I am doing the creative part has helped me just sort of be able to be like, right, I don't actually have to worry about both at the same time. I think we have, especially in America, especially for like this whole idea that's sort of been shoved down our throats of this like capitalist American dream. I think it's really easy to entangle our ambition and our arts to this idea of what success is. And I think that can be really detrimental to the process of making things. I think you and I, and I can say this about your work because I know it, but like I think you and I are both really interested in taking big stylistic swings. Yes. And really going for it. And I think that if we allowed in our process too much of us thinking, is this going to sell? Is this going to happen, to filter in? I think it would be at the detriment of our work. I think you just sort of have to make the thing and trust that the people are there to do it. Now, when it comes to screenplay or television shows, and I'll say this, maybe I hope that nobody's listening that's trying to buy it, but like
nobody's listening at all. So don't worry.
No, they are. I'm working on this project right now, and we're getting ready to pitch it out to a network. And there's something that is in the pitch pages that absolutely I would never, ever in 100 years put into the pilot. But I know that if I do that, it would sell. And so I'm planning to bait and switch.
You hear it here first.
Way. Well, I'm not, it's not like a full bait and switch. It's just like, this is across the board. I just went through this with a play that I have turned in, and it's a whole thing now, but there's the pitch and then there's the actual thing that you make. And they're definitely similar, but they also are different. They will inevitably be different because the process of making things is not like the pitch isn't frozen in time, and we have to have the elasticity to be able to change in our art,
And it will be an organic process where more people get involved and it becomes something that retains probably, hopefully, the core vision and intention, but the execution, may find different variations, and I think that's cool.
Yeah.
So to close, because we're I think going into the hour, I want to ask you, how do you deal?
This went so fast. I'm like, we've only been talking for 10 minutes. What are you talking about?
For everybody else, it felt like 3 hours. For us, it felt like 10 minutes because we're really, that's how friendship is. Yeah. How do you deal with pursuing your artistic dreams in the face of normie friends who have kids and perhaps real jobs? I wanted to that question so much. How do you face the Sunday brunch with those normal people that you have to tell them that you're very excited about this pitch or about this all the
Yeah.
exciting things that you tell me and I'm really impressed by, but then in the eyes of anybody else, it's weird or disconnected, and they have kids and a normal life. And
Yeah. Well, I don't have any friends that aren't artists. No, I'm just kidding. I'm
that's
just
the
kidding.
trick. That's the trick.
That's how. No, I
don't know. I mean, I love some of my favorite moments ever in making anything, and this will connect back, I promise. But some of my favorite moments, especially because I work in like a very surreal plane, is like I'm developing a television series right now with Natasha Leone, and I'm writing it and she's directing it, and it's with A24. And we were creating the visual deck for the show. The pilot's already written. It's sort of ready to go. We were just putting together the visual components, and we were looking at, her and I together, we were looking at, I think I want to say 3,000 images of Americana folklore creature feature things that we sourced from movies that we had put together to a list and given to a graphic designer. And we were on a Zoom call for 2 hours, and we could only say 3 words to each other. We could say yes, no, or maybe. And then eventually we could say walkie-talkie and accordion. It was just something that like organically developed.
I love those other extra words that don't seem very helpful, but amazing.
They were really, actually, it was really helpful because the show should feel more walkie-talkie than it should feel accordion. And so when we were looking at images, we would say, is this to accordion? And then it would be like, yes. Okay, so
can you define accordion and walkie-talkie for me?
Yeah, so the show is a werewolf tale on a island, and they're on like a rocky sort of Ireland inspired island. And I'm really into the idea that there's like maybe not cell phones, but there are things on cords, and you have to like pull things, and it's very sort of analog, like a very analog sort of world. And accordion falls into the analog sort of world, but it's maybe like too goofy of an instrument. So
it is.
So like accordion became too, and it happened because I kept saying no to images with accordions, and then Natasha was finally like, you're only saying no to images that have accordions in it. And we were like, why is that? And then we were like, okay, so let's like use that as part of the language. All of that to say that like that was a moment in my life where like when I zoomed out, I'm like, my life is actually just sort of like looking at images of truly like werewolves absolutely mauling people and being like, that's kind of too accordion for me. And I'm like, this career is so insane. And I'm so lucky to be doing it. And I worked really hard to be doing it. And I'm really thankful to be doing it. And it's so fun to have that spirit of play. And then, and then you're at your normie brunch and you're hearing about, so-and-so has to, and I can be like a judgy person in this way, but they're like, yeah, and we're like trying to sell the company and do this. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm not part of that world. And then I'm like, and that's like my sort of like surface is like, God, like cubicle life, not for me. And then and I've worked in corporate world before when I was working in radio, but then then I like zoom out from that and I'm like, but for you, the person that's saying that, like, this is your accordion walkie-talkie weird way of speaking. This is the thing that you're passionate and you care about. And so I try to meet those careers on their terms. Like I have a cousin who's an accountant, and I don't know jack shit about accounting. I don't know anything about that, but there's something about it that like really excites him. And so we can find, when we're talking about work specifically, we can find that common ground where like now my cousin will call me and he'll be like, how's it going? And I'm like, like we're doing the pitch. And he's like, oh, like that's like when I'm meeting with a client to try to like tell them to not invest in that property or to invest in that property. I'm like, yeah, actually, like it is sort of like that. And it causes me to talk about my art in a more, just in different terms that I'm not used to speaking in. And I hope that didn't all sound like so pretentious. I'm not trying to say like, because arts jobs are the best and regular jobs are like bad, but I just mean like, I don't know, there's something that's so interesting about finding mutual language with people. It's one of the things that I'm interested in writing about. And so meeting people on the terms of like what they're passionate about and talking to them through that lens instead of necessarily like slapping on my like, and now you're just going to talk about like kooky art stuff, person who doesn't care.
And and hopefully connects us with the real world and thinking outside of the industry, because that's where we draw inspiration from, and
Totally.
those stories happen in the world of the guy who's selling a company, or the guy who has a 9 to 5, or the woman that is looking for a promotion, or doing a hike with a dog with a smoothie in hand.
Yeah,
You need to know how those things work.
Exactly. Well, and like our industry is so insular, like it really is a bubble. And a part of that, I think, is also because our schedules are wackadoo. Like when you said Sunday brunch, I'm like, man, who has the time?
For sure.
Yeah. But anyway, it's cool. It's interesting. It's the world.
All right. This has been an amazing experience to talk to you again. It really felt like we were back in the bus.
It did.
Where everything started.
Where it all went down. And then there was also the van. There was also the van twice.
The van was even more. Yeah, the van was more of like incorporating other friends into the mix.
And some things we can't quite talk about.
And a lot of things that happen that will stay in the intimacy of our own friendship. Dylan, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. This is so fun.
Looking forward to see you again when you come to the West Coast.
Yes, and when you come to the East Coast,
we'll hang out. Yeah. Thank you very much.
It's not that cold anymore. Thank you.